കോളേജുകളും. Friends, welcome to this lecture on political theory. Today's lecture is about multiculturalism, the fundamentals. In fact, it was our last day lecture. Today we were supposed to lecture on social capital, but today we going to talk last day's lecture, multiculturalism. So friends, multiculturalism is a dominant theory in political discussions. This idea is very recent in origin. Multicultural societies have existed quite a long time ago. For example, Ottoman Empire was a multicultural society. The multicultural character of Ottoman Empire attained its peak during the 16th and early 17th century. And in USA, the idea of multiculturalism was in the mainstay from the early 19th century. However, as I told you, this concept, I mean multiculturalism, is relatively recent in origin. The word multicultural was technically used first in Canada in the year 1965. And the Canadians use this word multicultural, use this word as a distinctive policy to resolve the issues of cultural diversity in Canadian society. And in 1971, Canada adopted multiculturalism as a policy, official policy, to treat Canadians in a bilingual framework. I mean, people who speak more than one language. It was a public policy in Canada. Multiculturalism was a public policy in Canada. And Australia, in the year 1988, passed Multicultural Act. But the word multiculturalism became very prominent in 1990s. In 1990s. That's why I told you the word multiculturalism as a political concept was very recent in origin. So technically, multiculturalism implies an endorsement of diversity. It recognizes the rights of different cultural groups within a national framework. National framework means a national society, a nation. Within a nation, there are different cultural identity, and their cultural identities are respected. At the same time, they are being taken as part of the national identity. At the same time, they have, two identities, their cultural identity as well as the national identity. So as I told you, as a theoretical argument, multiculturalism emerged in the 1960s, primarily in the 1960s in the USA. It emerged as a consciousness movement. Within US society in the 1960s. Consciousness movement in the sense that a group argues that we have a distinct cultural identity. Our identity is distinct from the national identity. So as a distinct identity within a national society, we have to assert our identity. That's why it is said that in the 1960s, multiculturalism became prominent in the 1960s in USA as a consciousness movement. And friends, in the 1960s and 70s, Europe, Western Europe, witnessed growing political assertion among minorities. You think that there are German language speaking population in Germany, Spanish language speaking population in Spain, Portuguese language speaking people in Portugal, English language speaking people in England or UK, or Italian language speaking people in Italy. I'm not speaking about those broad identity, but I'm speaking about cultural identities that are distinct within Spain, within Italy, within Portugal, within France. So, as I told you, in the 60s and 70s, Europe witnessed the rise of so many, cultural identity assertions in the 60s and 70s. And sometimes we can call them ethno-cultural nationalism. Ethno-cultural nationalism. So, ethno-cultural nationalism attained prominence in the 60s and 70s in two important locations: Western Europe, North America. You can find that French language speaking population in Quebec, province of Canada, began to assert their cultural distinctiveness within Canadian society in the 70s. In the 1970s, the French-speaking Quebec population within Canadian society, so Quebec is a province in Canada, they began to say that we are a distinct population within Canada. And the Canadian society began to recognize, yes, you are a distinct identity and we respect you. At the same time, if you go to United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, UK, there is the rise of Scottish nationalism and Welsh nationalism. So the Welsh people and the Scottish people in the UK began to say that, oh, you are English speaking, society. The people in, people with the Scottish culture and the Welsh culture are different from the Britons. So we are different. We are not like you. We have a distinct cultural identity. And in the same way, in Spain, the Catalonians and the Basque, people, B-A-S-Q-U-E, the Basque people in Spain argued that the Catalonians and the Basque are different, and we are different from the Hispanic. Hispanic means the Spanish identity, the national identity of the Spanish people, the Hispanic identity. We are different from the Hispanic identity of Spain. So the Catalonians and the Basque people began to argue in the 1970s. And the Corsica movement in France, the Corsicans, Corsicans, the Corsicans argue, yes, we are also different. We are not like you. We have a different identity. Though we are minority, we have a distinct identity, cultural identity. We are not like the French-speaking, French population. We are different. The Corsicans argue. The same way, friends, in Belgium, you will see the Flanders, Flanders. The Flanders in Belgium began to assert the same thing which we have witnessed in UK, in Canada, in Spain. So the planters argued we have a distinct distinct cultural identity, other than the Belgium, the national identity in Belgium. And the Native Americans in Canada and USA, the native population in Canada and USA began to assert that we are different. We are the original people who have settled in Canada and USA before the Europeans came to this North America. So our forefathers have been living in this part of the world before the Europeans arrived in North America. And in Australia, the Aboriginal people, you might remember Kathy Freeman, a famous Aboriginal, athlete who participated and became famous in one of the Olympics. The Aboriginal population in Australia began to argue that before the Europeans arrived in Australia, we were living here. We were the original inhabitants of Australia. And the Maoris in New Zealand. So before Thomas Cook, who arrived in New Zealand, so we were here. We were here. It's our land. You came later. We have been here. Our grandfathers and their forefathers were here. Our great parents were here. So it's our land. And we have distinct cultural identity other than the Australian identity or the New Zealand identity or the US identity or the Canadian identity. We have a distinct identity. So friends, so this is one sort of argument, ethno-cultural nationalism. That people who are the natives of each societies began to assert that we were here for long, our forefathers were here, and we have a distinct national identity other than your national identity. Other than this, friends, there is another type of, cultural assertion. It is called growing cultural assertion among people who are migrants. You might remember in the post-World War era, because of growing international connection, people from different parts of the world began to migrate to other parts of the world and who have started settling in countries which are not their homeland. And this process started since 1945. And in the UK, for example, since 1950s and in 1960s, you will remember from history textbook, people from West Indies and people from the Indian subcontinent, migration. There were huge migration to Britain because Britain colonized West Indies and the Indian subcontinent for centuries. So many people were so much connected with Britain. So even after getting independence, people from these areas began to migrate to Britain. And you will see, France had colonies in Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. And people from the same place, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, began to migrate to France. And in West Germany, there were immigrants, guest workers from Turkey and Yugoslavia. Germany had recruited so many Turks and the Yugoslavians in the 1960s and 70s. And in USA, since 1970s, there were huge migration from Mexico and other Latin American countries. A huge migration to United States of America since 1970s, particularly from Mexico and as well from, Latin American countries. And it is already found that US population by 2050, a quarter of the US population will be Latinos. That 25% of the population in 1950 will be constituted by the Latin Americans alone. And friends, by 1990s, there was marked intensification of cross-border migration across the globe. Since 1990s, there were, marked intensification. There's a solid intensification of cross-border migration across the globe. People from one country migrated to another country and settled there. And also because of civil war, other conflicts in Algeria, in Rwanda, Uganda, Bangladesh, Indochina, and Afghanistan. The famous writer, you may remember, and from Afghanistan, who wrote Kite Runner. What was his name? Kite Runner? Who wrote the famous book? Anybody remember? Kite Runner, author of Kite Runner, who migrated to USA from Afghanistan. What was that? Who was that? I forgot his name. I read that novel, Kite Runner and the Mountain Echoes. Famous novels. I forgot his name. I read that novel. So many people from these areas migrated to, USA and Europe. So friends, by 2000s, a growing number of Western states began to be multicultural societies because their population is also comprised by people who are not originally born in that country, in a particular country, but they were forced to incorporate such people to their national society. So this idea is called multiculturalism. Okay, so multiculturalism is based on three important approaches. Which I will tell you. There are certain core assumptions or fundamentals to a multicultural argument. So the multicultural argument got certain core assumptions. What are them? I will identify four important multicultural assertions or arguments. One is the politics of recognition. Second is culture and identity. Third is minority rights. And fourth assertion is diversity. So friends, multiculturalism is simply recognizing communal diversity. That your society is a mix of racial differences, ethnic differences, and linguistic differences. And accept that. You accept that. We have so many racially different, people in our society, culturally different people, linguistically different people, and all of you are part of this nation. This broad idea is called multicultural assertion. It's both a descriptive term as well as a normative term. Both a descriptive term and a normative term. You can use multiculturalism as a descriptive term as well as a normative term. As a normative term, you are going to recognize and celebrate diversity of a particular society. You are going to recognize people with differences. People with differences. At the same time, as a descriptive term, multiculturalism is the idea that within a society, there are two or more groups whose beliefs, whose identities, whose practices are distinct. So you can use multiculturalism as a normative term as well as a descriptive term. And let us come across the core assumptions of multicultural societies. The first one, friends, the politics of recognition. What is the politics of recognition? Friends, a multicultural society argue minorities in any national society are disadvantaged in relation to the majority population. Just like we say Muslims in India, Christians in India, Parsis in India, vis-a-vis the majority Hindus. These communities are minorities and they feel disadvantaged. How you can grow? You can grow only by recognizing these minorities as part of your society. So change the rules and institutions and incorporate them. Make them feel that they are part of this nation. So three contrasting approaches are adopted for recognizing minorities. First one is ideas of rights, respect rights. Second, redistribution of resources. Third, recognition. So politics of recognition has three distinct approaches in a multicultural society. The first point is that politics of recognition. That's a one important core assumption of a multicultural society, the politics of recognition. There is a politics behind recognition, that you are respecting Muslim minorities in India, for example, or you're respecting Indians in America, or you're respecting the Chinese in Britain. So this notion of recognition of minorities, that is called the politics of recognition, which got three approaches. One is you respect rights. Second, you redistribute. Third, you recognize. First point, politics of right. Politics of right is based on republicanism. Respecting right is a republican idea. The key idea of republicanism is the principle of universal citizenship. No matter where you are born, you have certain basic minimum entitlements. It's a Republican notion. It doesn't matter where you are born. You have certain entitlements. So respect the rights of every individual who are born on earth. So this means difference-blind societies. Difference-blind societies. And our Indian society is not like a difference-blind society. We always, celebrate our differences. And there are so many caste divides. There are, gender divides. There are language divides. Everything in our society. So Tamil Nadu, they are not allowing people from Kerala to enter Tamil Nadu. Karnataka, they are not allowing us to enter into their territory. But we say we are a nation. But within nation, some identity is not respecting the other identity. The Kerala is not, respected as members of the same nation by Karnataka people or the Tamil people. So we are highly a divided society. But friends, this is another issue not to be discussed here. But a good society is always a difference-blind society, that we are not seeing the difference. We are always seeing the unity. So if you want to grow, your society should be difference-blind society. The first point, recognition of right. Second is the politics of redistribution. That, friends, why people are marginalized in modern society. People are marginalized in modern society not because of political and legal exclusion, that you are not represented in the parliament, you have no legal protection. That is not the only reason why people are marginalized in modern society. There are social disadvantages. If you are not respecting, if you are not recognizing the fact that the basic reason why minorities are marginalized in a modern society is because of social disadvantages, your society cannot grow then. So, a multicultural society, because of its distinct argument of politics of recognition, gives emphasis first to politics of right, second is politics of redistribution. That is, why poverty in your society, why unemployment in your society, why poor housing in your society, why lack of education in your society. Friends, all these things contribute to the fact that minorities in your society are living in the fringes of your society. They are living in the margins of your society. They are being dislocated to the walls of your society. Bring them to the mainstay. How? Give them education. You give education to Muslims in India, so their situation will change. You give education to Muslim girls in India, the situation will change. You give education to Muslim boys in India, the situation will change. The unemployment will be wiped out. You solve the poor housing problem of poor housing. So you solve the problem of poverty of minorities in your society. So that way you redistribute resources. Thereby people feel belonging. And third point, recognition. Friends, important point by which Europe dominated the Orient, the Occident dominated the Orient, was because the famous notorious notion called white man's burden. which was popularized by that writer who wrote a famous book. What was that? White Man's Burden. I forgot. My memory is, very weak these days. Um, Jungle Book, right?
Jungle Book.
Yes, Jungle Book.
Rudyard. Rudyard.
Yes. Rudyard Kipling, right? Rudyard Kipling, right? So Rudyard Kipling, in his famous book Jungle Book, stated that every white man is born in the planet Earth with a historic mission. What is that? He is born to civilize all those non-white people. This ethnocentric, Eurocentric worldview, which they were able to instill in the minds of all the people where they have migrated, where they have settled. For example, when they went to Australia, when they went to South Africa, when they went to India, when they went to Afghanistan, no matter where, these Europeans were able to instill this mindset in the mind of all the places they have invaded. So still, that ghost is in our mind. When a man with white color says something, we respect that. When a man with white color write a book, we read that. When a man with white color direct a movie, we watch that. Still, our mind is colonized. So, friends, the West has created an inherent inferiority complex in the minds of people in the East. This notion has been highly popularized by the writings of famous writer Edward Said in his famous book Orientalism. That the Orient thinks about what is the Orient not by looking the Orient into itself, but by the way in which the Occident look into the Orient. We are understanding ourselves. Getting it? Complicated. What I'm saying is that India is understanding what is India is not by Indians looking into Indians alone, but Indians are understanding who is an Indian by way of what the Britons are saying who is an Indian. Clear? You got it, friends?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this way of an inferiority complex is in our psyche. This can be destroyed by the politics of recognition. So that's a black nationalism. Black nationalism is a movement of pride that I am black. I am proud of my identity. So this is part of post-colonial literature, and for example, Edward Said says that there is an inherent Eurocentric worldview. Look at your atlas. You look at your atlas, where all the rich, advanced countries are being located on the above of the equator. Why? Because all the European countries are located above the equator. Even the map, even the history is being written as the time before Jesus Christ and the time after Jesus Christ. Why? And all the knowledge systems in the world is dominated by a Eurocentrism. You have to destroy that. And people all over the world have to believe that my culture, my distinct identity, my inventions, and my knowledge are best. Only by such a notion of that we are also good, we can destroy the dominance of the West and can assert our identity. So this Eurocentrism, you have to destroy the Eurocentrism. So for example, Edward Said himself said, the West has created so much stereotypes, So much serious stereotypes. They are saying that mysterious East. Friends, East was all famous for high cultures. All the best ancient civilizations took shape not in Europe, but in East. Mesopotamia, Assyrians, Babylonians, Indians, Harappa, Chinese. All these high cultures, when they took shape, there were no Europeans. There were no the present day US people. But they say the mysterious East. Why? This cultural superiority of the West, the Europe. Or they say the inscrutable Chinese. We are not able to understand who is a real China. Napoleon once famously said, "There's a sleeping lion in China. Don't awaken it." So this type of stereotypes being posted frequently against non-white people. So the non-white people themselves began to think that, oh, we are bad. And the Europeans say the lustful Turks, politically incorrect usage, the lustful Turks. So these types of stereotypes are being spread against non-white people. So you have to destroy that by how? By way of politics of recognition. This is a multicultural argument. And second point is culture and identity. What is this? That culture and identity. Multicultural argument is that you need to have pride in your own culture. Need to have pride in your own culture. You should acknowledge that your culture is best. You have to acknowledge your food culture is best, your language is best, your dress culture is best, your name is best. So this will give you a confidence in life that I am best, my language is best, my food culture is best, my dress culture is best, my art is best, my music is best. This way, friends, we can have confidence to survive in life. But at the same time, if you believe that, oh, my culture, my language, my food culture, my dress culture, oh, these are all bad. Look at the West, look at the Europeans, look at the Americans. They all have very good culture. We say kutisaipu in our local tongue, kutisaipu. So this way of looking at the West for everything and believing that, oh, my identity, my culture is very bad. See, you have to destroy that and believe that you have a distinct culture and identity. Once you feel that your culture is bad, you will lose all the confidence. So communitarians, particularly communitarians, we will talk about communitarians in another class, believe that all your skills are culturally embedded. Who gave you all the skills that you have? The liberals argue that you are born with the skills because nature has given you all the skills. But communitarians will never believe. All your culture is given to you by the community. That means self is embedded. Their famous argument. Self is embedded. That you have an encumbered self. That's the vocabulary they have used. Self is embedded, one argument, and another is you have an encumbered self. Encumbered self is another argument that you are not an atomistic individual. What you have is because you are part of a community, and all your skills, the way you talk, the way you write, the way you perceive things, the way you write, the way you the way you dance, the way you sing. Why? Is it because of you are talented? Not at all. All your skills are because of your culture. Respect your culture. So this is communitarian argument being proposed by famous writers like Alasdair MacIntyre and Michael Sandel. We will talk about these writers in another class, just for reference, friends. So friends, these communitarians, they critic this liberal perspective and say that you have to respect your culture. And third point is minority rights. As I told you, there are four important points about, multicultural argument, politics of recognition, culture and identity, and third, minority rights. Friends, you have to respect, recognize your minorities in the society, the minorities in your society. And minority rights are otherwise called multicultural rights. And Will Kimlicka, he was a famous multicultural writer, Will Kimlicka, Willkymlicka. You can find this from the notes I have given you for reading a review, last unit, 6th unit, I think. There you will find all these writers and their books. Will Kimlicka argued that there are three kinds of minority rights. Self-government, that's a minority rights. Polyethnic rights, that's a minority rights. Polyethnic right. Third, representation right. What is self-government right? In your society, the minorities have right to self-government. The Native Americans, the Inuits, and the Métis people in Canada, the Maoris in New Zealand, the Aboriginal people in Australia, the Sami people in Sweden, Norway and Finland, they are all, Aboriginal people. And they should have right to self-government, polyethnic rights, representation right. You should give them special, privileges. The self-government. Polyethnic right means rights that help ethnic minorities express and maintain cultural distinctiveness. And third, representation right. What is it, representation right? That multicultural argument is that you should give positive discrimination or preferential treatment. Positive discrimination or preferential treatment. You treat all people equally, but the point is that if there are minorities, you should give them priority. Why? Because they are, minority in your majority land. In India, we call this reservation. In the US, it is affirmative action. In other part of the world, it is positive discrimination. So friends, minorities have a distinct cultural identity. You have to respect. For example, I can tell you a famous example of our development policies, our scientific worldview, how this destroy cultural distinctiveness of minorities. For example, in December 6, 1959, 6th December 1959, the then Prime Minister of India, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, visited West Bengal to inaugurate a dam built by Damodar Valley Corporation. A 15-year-old girl, a tribal girl from Santhal community, Nehru invited this 15-year-old tribal girl, Budini. It was called Budini. And as a matter of good gesture, that a dam in West Bengal is being inaugurated, Nehru garlanded her. He just put a flower garland on her, neck, garlanded her. But friends, that night, the Sandal tribals convened a meeting and declared that Budini is married to Jawaharlal Nehru. And she was, excommunicated. She was declared outcast because she married a man outside of their tribal identity. Because that is their belief system. Nehru, a positive worldview, had a great vision about gender equality, so on and so on things. But the point is that when you go to a community, a local community, they have their own worldview where when you garland a girl is being equal to you marrying her, you have to respect their custom. Because that is their self, cultural self. But what happened? No, Udini was excommunicated. So that's the point, friends. No matter where, you have to respect the rights, the cultural distinctiveness of minorities in your society. Respect them. Respect the Muslims. Respect their culture. Respect their belief. Respect the Christians. They have their own value system, worldview, and respect that. You can build a good society by respecting these differences. So a classic example of minority rights, I'm telling you. And another point, last point is diversity. Multicultural argument is that diversity and unity should be blended. You need a unity, but you can build unity through diversity. So India's motto is unity in diversity. That we are a polyglot and polytheistic society. We have different languages, we have different regions, we have different religions. So we find unity in that distinctiveness of differences, different identities. So multicultural argument is that people have multiple identities. Let the British people have at the same time the US citizenship. An American will have not only American citizenship, an American will also have a Belgian citizenship or a Portuguese citizenship. But in India, so far, we never granted such rights to the Indian citizens. At the same time, we cannot hold the citizenship of another nation. The moment the government of India knows that you have got the citizenship of another country, your natural citizenship will be terminated in India according to our constitutional provisions, as well as the Citizenship Act passed by our Parliament in the year 1955. The Indians will lose our natural citizenship, no matter you got it, how you got it. The moment the government knew that you got the citizenship of another country, your citizenship will be terminated. Indian citizenship will be terminated. But it's not the case of other countries. In other part of the world, citizens have multiple nationalities. At the same time, they are nationals of other societies. You will have a citizenship in the country of your origin. At present, we are celebrating diaspora identity, and we are calling back the Indians who have migrated to other part of the world. There are so many people in Britain, so many people in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, USA. So we have a Pravasa Bharatiya Divas. We are celebrating that day when Gandhi came back to India from South Africa. I think it's on January 15. Gandhi came back to India. So that day, India celebrates Pravasa Bharatiya Divas. So, friends, you have to give citizenship to all the people of origin. So we have people of Indian origin, we have non-resident Indians, we have diaspora. So all the countries have these kinds of people, that their ancestors were born in somewhere, but at present they are living in another part of the world. So you have to respect that diversity. Thereby you can build a good society. So a multicultural argument is that diversity is not only it is not only possible, diversity is also desirable and celebrated, should be celebrated. You should not confine only to the possibility of diversity. You have to search, not only search it, it is desirable. In this time of grave ironies, we need to celebrate our diversity, and also diversity is desirable and should celebrate it. So diversity is beneficial to society. In the same way, diversity is beneficial to social survival. In the same way, biodiversity benefit the ecosystem. Ecosystem survive because of diversity. In the same way, society can survive only if you celebrate diversity. So friends, with this, key important assumptions of a multicultural society, that's politics of recognition, culture and identity, respecting minority rights, and respecting diversity. I would like to end up the core assumptions of multiculturalism, and the lecture is ended here. Now the floor is open for discussion, friends.